Welcome back to Sabbath Services. Now, I want to announce again, next week, be sure and tell all of your friends in other churches of God to listen to the live streaming. Okay? Because we are going to cover something very important that is a key to helping to understand what appear to be difficult scriptures. Okay? Now, I also want to show you this. This was sent by the printing company about what the vinyl cover would look like stamped with gold. Now, this is not our Bible, but it's a Bible that they have produced subsequently. I would like a little thicker vinyl, and I want them to send me a sample with the end sheet. So if you take your Bible and just open up the cover and look at it, you will see there's a big heavy end sheet that is glued to the inside of the cover, and then is a separate sheet on the inside. And so we have very strong paper there, if you will look at it in the Bible that you have. Okay? So this looks pretty good. They still haven't found the paper necessary to do it, but we are all out of lambskin Bibles, and the paperbacks, we have little over 1,000 of those left. And of the calfskin, we have about 4,000. Now, the reason to buy them at this time is, who knows what the price will be if there's massive inflation that runs. See? Just like we recently purchased 2 new copiers. Each of the old copiers had over 3 million impressions on them. So we got a good price for both of them. But if the dollar begins to collapse and inflation takes off like it normally does, then instead of paying $30,000, we would be paying $40,000 or $45,000 for the same thing. So we just got those and got those installed because we produce a lot of things and print a lot of things here. All right. Now let's continue on with questions. We need to wrap this up. Okay. There are a number of questions here. Number one, does the Bible say it's okay to eat out at a restaurant on the Holy Sabbath? Well, that question always comes up, especially when there is traveling involved. Okay. Now, if you have a long way to go, it is permissible to eat out. But if you don't have a long way to go, you don't need to eat out. Now, here with us here, we don't eat out on the Sabbath. We eat here on the Sabbath. We have quite a bit of food that various ones bring in, and we have a nice little chow down here. So that works very good. But a lot of people go to services and then go out to eat. Well, did you travel a long distance? Probably not. Well, then you shouldn't be eating out at a restaurant. Number two, if a person is divorced and remarried, who's committing adultery? Well, that's why every divorce and remarriage problem needs to be thoroughly investigated and thoroughly understand the problems. And it's not that a minister will sit down and have a short counseling service and you make a decision binding or not binding. You need to find out when they were married, why they were married, the circumstances of the marriage, the circumstances within the marriage after they were married. Okay. You have to find out what were their sexual activities before marriage, because that has a great deal to do with marriage. And then you have to find out, was there fraud? Did the person lie? Did they come on pretext? See? If you marry to get something for yourself rather than marry the person for who they are, you're lying. When the vows are, do you, and you say, I do, see, that's a lie. So everyone has to be handled separately. All right. Should Christians celebrate / observe birthdays? Well, we have an article online about birthdays originated with the pagans, and it was to the goddess Athena. Now, in the Hebrew calculated calendar, since the days vary, there will be, in the leap years where there's an extra month, everyone who is born in the 13th month cannot have a birthday every year. Okay? But when you read in the Bible about Jesus and his age in Luke, the 3rd chapter, it says he was about 30. Why? Because he was probably born on the Feast of Trumpets, and the Feast of Trumpets would come at different times according to how the calculated Hebrew calendar worked, whether it was a leap year with 13 months or whether it was a common year with 354, 55, or 56 days. See, all of those variants show that you cannot have a definite birthday. But is it all right to acknowledge how old you are? Yes. Is it all right to acknowledge for children how old they are? Yes. Okay. But to have big celebrating parties with cakes and candles and things like this, that comes from paganism. We covered voting. Next one, should a Christian woman have short haircut like a man? Well, no, she shouldn't. And as a matter of fact, there was a wife of a minister who recently left the church, that all the time she was in the church, she had short hair like a man. And the Bible says in 1 Corinthians 11 that long hair is given to a woman as her covering. See? And that it's a shame for a man to have long hair. Okay? So, for a woman to have short hair like a man, and especially where the elder could not control his own wife to get her to stop having short hair. Okay? Now, you read in the Faithful Version, the first part of chapter 11 of 1 Corinthians, and you will find the whole discussion there. All right? In the Bible, is retirement, that is not working, an option according to the 4th commandment and John 5:17. Well, John 5:17 says, I work and my Father works. Now, that's spiritual work. You look at the solar system and the universe. Does God stop it on the Sabbath day? The Jews foolishly think that if you flip a switch on the Sabbath, you're causing a fire somewhere. Well, God is causing the sun, which is a giant fire, wouldn't you agree, to go all the time. Okay? So, in that sense of retirement for human beings, when you get old, keep in as good as health as you can so you can do as much as you can. Okay? But there are times when you're older and you do not have the energy, you do not have the ability because of age. Okay? So you wouldn't be working perhaps at a job, but what would you be doing? Well, a lot of people that retire, they putt around in the yard and putt around in the house and have a hobby or something like that. That's true. That's perfectly all right. But to be retired doesn't mean that you go and just sit in a chair 18 hours a day before you go to bed. Okay. Okay. And besides, you can't compare John 5, the spiritual work of Jesus on the Sabbath, and the spiritual work that God is doing every day of the week, okay, including the Sabbath. Okay. If a Christian has chosen to have a pension plan profit and or retirement plan or to purchase stocks, which is or has been investing in companies which work, that is, conducting business employees on the Sabbath and holy days. If you invest in a company, you can't control what they are going to do. You are there as an investment. Okay? Now then, should you invest in an arms company that makes bombs and torpedoes and artillery shells and tanks and guns? Probably not. I would say not. Okay? So you have to be steward of your own money. You have to sit down and ask the question, is this a company that I should invest in? What are they doing? How are they doing it? You have no control over whether they keep the Sabbath or not. And God calls all of that you do with that unrighteous mammon. See? In other words, it is perfectly fine to make investments to increase what you're doing. That's what Matthew 25 and Luke 19 are all about. The talents and the pounds are forms of money given to the steward. Now, the steward is the one who takes the money from the owner and invests it for the owner's benefit. So whatever profit there is goes back to the owner, and the owner pays the steward for managing his money. Okay? So we have that today with some stock investments and so forth. You need to be careful of that, like we have the, what is that, XTF we have today? That thing that just collapsed. Some idiot running it before he quit. He donated money everywhere he could get rid of the money. And it was illegal for him to do it, but he did it. And they arrested him, brought him back here, and 2 people put up the money for his bond, which was way high, but no one can find out who posted the bail. See? This world is crooked. This world is filled with lies and deceit. So if you make money, you also can lose money. So you have to decide how you're going to do it. If the same question is investing money in health companies, stocks and bonds that make vaccines and so forth, well, they're killing a lot of people. See? Now remember this. So you have to draw the line. You have to look, let's come to Matthew 4. You have to look and find out what is the company, who owns it, what is being done, what are their policies, okay? Some of them you will find are very good. Now, Verse 8, this was the temptation of Jesus. Okay. And after that, the devil took him to an exceeding high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. That is in a moment of time. Kind of like a huge video screen. Okay. And he said to him, all these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. See? Now, you come to Luke 4, we find a little bit more added to that. See? Who controls the monetary system? Well, I don't know any church member sitting on the board of the Federal Reserve, do you? Now, it's not wrong to take money and make an increase, because that's what Matthew 25 and Luke 13 are all about. See? But not with massive interest. Okay? Here in Luke 4, let's pick it up in verse 5. Then the devil led him up into a high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said to him, I will give you all this authority, the glory of them all, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whomever I desire. Therefore, if you will worship me in my presence, all things shall be yours. Okay? Now we find out the super rich of the world got rich by Satan. You ever heard of the World Economic Forum? That's going on right now. By all of these billionaires and billionaires who want to rule and control the world. Who does that come from? Where does their wealth come from? How much of that is funneled through various banks to transfer money from drugs and child trafficking and illegal activity? Don't know. So, if you have any money you're going to invest, you better understand what you are doing. Okay? Same way with healthcare company. We should be trusting God for our healing, and we should be taking care of ourselves by not putting a lot of these substances into our bodies. Question here, I don't remember you ever explaining John 2:19. So let's go there. Let's go back to verse 13. Now the Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves and money exchangers sitting there. And after making a scourge of cords, he drove them all out of the temple, both the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the coins of the money exchangers and overturned their tables. Now, you can just imagine what that was like. He came in and took the tables and went, pooh! And all of their coins of money are rolling everywhere. Whose is whose? Where is mine? Who are you? Why are you coming in and doing this thing? I mean, that was quite a dramatic entrance into the temple, right? Okay. And those who were selling doves, he said, take these things out of here. See? All of that was to be done outside the court of the temple, not in it. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise. Then the disciples remembered that it is written, the zeal of your house has eaten me up. As a result, the Jews answered and said to him, what sign do you show to us, seeing that you do these things? Now, Jesus typically did not answer their question the way that they would think, because he answers the question concerning the house of God, which should be a house of prayer for all people. He did not answer the question why he overturned the tables and got rid of the money exchangers and drove them all out. He said this. He prophesied what was going to happen, and they were the ones who were going to do it. But they didn't understand, because this was at the beginning of his ministry. Okay? Jesus answered and said to them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Now that was a mystery to them. How are you going to do that? See? Then the Jews said, "The temple was 46 years in building, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" Because he answered the question spiritually, what was going to happen to him. Okay. Verse 21, but he spoke concerning the temple of his body. Therefore, when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this to them, and they believed the scriptures and the word that Jesus had spoken. Okay. So, here's another lesson to learn. When you first have the question, you may not get the answer for quite a while. Okay. Only Jesus understood what he was saying. The disciples didn't. Obviously, the Jews and priests didn't. So, when you have a question like this, you need to read on to find the answer. So the answer is, he was talking about the temple of his body rather than the physical temple that he was standing in. Okay. Here's another question. Is the implication that Jesus, in the Spirit, raised his mortal body back to life? All right. Well, not necessarily. Let's come to John, the 10th chapter. Let's see what Jesus said. Okay. And we will find out the Father raised Jesus from the dead. He didn't raise himself from the dead. Okay. What was the last word he spoke when he was on the cross? Remember that? Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Okay. So his spirit went back to God the Father. Okay. Now what does it say in the last verse in James, the 2nd chapter? Without the spirit, the body is dead. Okay. So there was no power in that body that Jesus retained to raise himself from the dead. Okay. Here's what he said about that. Verse 14, John 10. I am the good shepherd and know those who are mine, and am known of those who are mine. Just as the Father knows me, I also know the Father. I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring those also, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. On account of this, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may receive it back again. So God the Father had to give him life back again that he had given up when he died. Okay? All right, let's see this. Let's come to Romans, the 8th chapter. And likewise for us. We are raised by the power of God the Father. See, if Jesus would have had any power in him when he was dead to raise himself, he would not have been dead. Right? That's why he committed his spirit to God the Father. All right, let's look in Romans 8. Let's pick it up in verse 4. In order that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who walk according to the flesh mind the things of the flesh, but those who walk according to the Spirit mind the things of the Spirit. Now that's called conversion. Has your thinking changed since you've been converted? Are you still being converted? Yes. Does your mind need to be renewed all the time with the Spirit of God? Yes. Doesn't the Apostle Paul say that our physical body is dying day by day, but our spirit is being renewed day by day? 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter? Yes. See, that's why we have the Sabbath. We need to be renewed. We need to be refreshed. We need to study the Word of God. We need to come in the presence of God because God is here with us in His Spirit. This is the day He has appointed. Okay? Verse 9. However, you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if the Spirit of God is indeed dwelling within you. But if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he does not belong to him. But if Christ be within you, the body is indeed dead because of sin. However, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. Now, if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is dwelling within you, okay, who raised him from the dead? The Father. See? The Spirit of him who raised him from the dead. Nowhere does it say that Jesus raised himself. He who raised Christ from the dead will also quicken your mortal bodies because of his Spirit that dwells within you. Okay? Now then, let's look at another one. Let's come to 1 Peter, the 1st chapter. Let's pick it up here in verse 20. Okay. Verse 20. Who truly was foreknown before the foundation of the world. Now, you go back before the foundation of the world, and you go back to before the ages of time, and all of those things are there relating to what God has done and is doing. Okay? But was manifested in these last times for your sake, even for you who through him do believe in God, who raised him from the dead, that is God the Father. He was raised from the dead, and gave him glory. What did Jesus pray, John 17? That what God would give him back the glory he had with him. When? Before the world existed. Okay? So that your faith and your hope might be in God. Okay? Having purified your lives by obedience to the truth unto unfeigned brotherly love through the Spirit, love one another fervently with a pure heart. Okay? So God is going to raise us from the dead. There are plenty of other scriptures there in the Bible, so go ahead and do a study. Okay? Here's a question. Are there any scriptures that speak of the specific qualifications of an apostle? No, there is not. And that question centers around who were the original apostles. Every single one was taught directly by Jesus, called directly by him when he was living in the flesh. They saw him, they heard him, he taught them. Okay. Now then, Paul also saw Jesus in vision. And Barnabas, he probably saw Jesus when he was in Jerusalem, because Barnabas originally came from Cyprus, a Levite. So that means he came to Jerusalem quite often. Other than that, we find no other apostle. We do not find that Paul, before he died, told Timothy, make sure you get here because I'm going to ordain you as an apostle. Okay? Nor was it with Titus. Okay? Now then, Herbert Armstrong originally rejected being called an apostle. But when he found out that that elevated him and gave him far more importance, he accepted it. But he was never an apostle. He never saw Jesus personally. He was never taught personally by Jesus. His claim was because his wife happened to be talking to a woman who was a member of Church of God Seventh Day, and they kept the Sabbath, and she convinced, that was Loma, that was Herbert Armstrong's wife, of the Sabbath, and she prodded Herbert Armstrong that she's going to keep the Sabbath, and he was going to prove her wrong. So at that time, there wasn't very much employment in America because of the Depression. So he went and spent every day for 6 months in the library in Portland. And there were a lot of books in there written by those who were ministers of the Church of God Seventh Day. One of them was G.G. Rupert. And all of the doctrines that he found that he embraced were the doctrines that were developed by the Church of God Seventh Day. And he attended the Church of God Seventh Day in Eugene, Oregon. And I know I talked to Otis Cole, whose father went to that church that Herbert Armstrong went to, and it was the Church of God Seventh Day. Okay? But they wouldn't accept the holy days. So that's how the Church of God began, with Herbert Armstrong, later called Radio Church of God, and after that called Worldwide Church of God. Okay? So no one today should be called an apostle. Okay? There are evangelists, there are pastors, and there are teachers. Okay? Now, I didn't have a chance to look this up. Okay, the question is, let's see how important the transfiguration was. We know that Peter was a Jew. We know that John was a Jew. Paul was a Jew. And the only one who may not have been a Jew was Luke. He wrote under the tutelage and direction of the Apostle Paul. This is from the book Who is Jesus, number 7, page number 73. Okay. Now, most of the apostles came from the area of Galilee. All of Galilee and Judea were known to be Jewish countries. But to be a Jew meant that you followed the traditions of the Jews. So, Jesus was of the house of Judah, the line of David, and you read the genealogy beginning in Matthew, the first chapter, it says, Jesus, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Okay? So the promise of Jesus goes clear back to Abraham. All right? So everyone who lived in Judea and Galilee were called Jews. But Paul was a Benjamite. He said he was from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay? John may have been from the house of Aaron. And they had their occupation as fishermen because the priests were not always at the temple all the time. They were there by course. You can read in the book of Second Chronicles, everything all laid out. Okay, so he's a fisherman. We don't know the others. Possibly Judas Iscariot was of the priestly line. We don't know. But they were probably from the other tribes of Israel, because there were a few from the 10 tribes that were always mixed in with the Jews. Now that happened because when the Assyrians attacked the northern 10 tribes, a lot of them fled down to the area of Judea when Hezekiah was king. So there were some of the 10 tribes there, but predominantly those from Judah. So I don't know what the question is. I'll have to get the book and look at it and see what it is, okay? Now then, here's another question. It has to do with David numbering Israel. It says in 2 Samuel 24 that God incited David to number Israel, saying, go number Israel and Judah. When you come to the book of Chronicles, it says Satan stirred him up to number. And Joab, his chief general, and I feel sorry for poor old Joab, he knew every stinking rotten thing that went on in the kingship, right? Okay? So he told David, you don't need to do it. So the only thing I can figure out is that David wanted to do it, and it was kind of like Balaam. Balaam wanted to come and curse the children of Israel, but God said, don't go. But he kept saying, I want to go. Balaam wants me to go, and he's going to pay me all this money. Okay, you go, but you'll only speak what I tell you to speak. Okay? And as a second witness against him, his own donkey stopped. He got off his donkey, and the donkey spoke to him in a verse, in a human's voice, what are you beating on me for? Okay, so we have this situation with David. David wanted to do it, and this turned out to be sin. He numbered them. And what happened? He never got them all numbered because of what God did in destroying 70,000 of the Israelites. Now, how God chose the 70,000, I do not know. But there were probably those who were idolaters and those who were not following God. Okay? But there's another lesson learned. Whenever a politician or a king or a leader does something terribly wrong, everybody pays the price, one way or the other. That's what we have today, okay? Here's another one. And then where's our citizenship? It's in heaven above, and Christ is going to bring it. Here's another one concerning the 144,000. We will send you the book that we have on it, booklet rather, there are 244,000. So you have to see where that is explained, and we will have that downloaded and sent to you. So that brings us up to date. We have all the questions answered. And so next Sabbath, be sure and be here, and tell as many of your friends to be sure and listen, because this is going to be an eye-opening thing. And it's going to center on where Jesus told Peter, and what you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and what you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. But that is a false translation. That's how the King James reads it. But what does the Pope say? I can bind anything. And if you've ever read the Fox's Book of Martyrs, and I've got 2 big volumes on that, I just might bring them next week, that the popes muse on their power. I can raise up kings and emperors. I can take them down. And everybody must obey what I say, because what I bind is bound in heaven, and what I loosed is loosed in heaven. Is that what it means? And the next question is, what is the correct translation? It's in the faithful version, correctly translated. But how does that apply to the rest of the Bible? You're going to be amazed. So we'll say, so long, everyone, till next Sabbath.